Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to my podcast, Don't Get a Therapist Yet. And today I have the honour and privilege of having my guest, Anna Pluck, who is a counsellor, very experienced counsellor, who specialises in anxiety. So, a warm welcome to you, Anna. And could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So, yeah, as you said, my name's Anna, and I am a therapist specialising in anxiety, and I work with adults 17 and up. And I've been doing that for almost 5 years now. And I started my journey to becoming a therapist after I went through a really bad period of anxiety myself, and counselling really helped me. And the techniques that I learned in therapy really helped me to overcome my anxiety, and it made me want to help other people do the same.
And that's a really good reason to become a therapist, isn't it, Anna? To that you really can
Mhm.
empathise what it's like to suffer from anxiety because you've been there yourself, and you've also therapy's helped you, and that's such a positive role model you are to all the people that you now support. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also gives people hope, because I think quite often if you're in the grip of anxiety, it does feel as if you're never going to get better and you're always going to be anxious. But, that's definitely not the case at all. So, if there's anyone listening to this who's really struggling, then, I just want them to know that they can get better from it, definitely.
Mm. And that's sort of said with real genuine authenticity, isn't it? Because you've been there and you know what it's
Mhm.
like, and you can really experience it. And the
Yeah.
people that I speak to with anxiety, I think what happens is sometimes, their friends and family are well-meaning, but sometimes they say things like, "Well, just do it or just get on with it." And if it was only that easy, I mean, have you had a similar experience yourself of people saying, "Just get on with it and just suck it up"? They sometimes say, don't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think anyone, if they could just snap out of it, then they absolutely would. But I think as well, what a lot of people don't understand about anxiety is it goes well beyond, just feeling a little bit nervous, and anxiety can affect people physically as well. So it's not just thinking about things a lot. It can also be, feeling really nauseous, feeling sick, feeling dizzy and shaky. And I think unless people have had anxiety themselves, or have learned about it, I don't think they realize how unwell it can make people feel as well.
Mm. Yeah, and you can be almost frozen with anxiety, can't you? You can be in
Mhm.
a place where you just don't can't move because you're just so overwhelmed with those feelings, which are very, very uncomfortable. And of course, people can have panic attacks, which is a very extreme anxiety, isn't it? Which is very frightening, terrifying experience. So yes, I definitely agree with that. It can be a very distressing experience. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about in your experience, what are sort of typical classic causes of anxiety?
Okay. I think I like a lot of Gabor Mate and what he writes. And one thing that he said that really struck me was our genes haven't changed in the past, 50 years or so, but anxiety has kind of shot up. And there's definitely, a biological cause to anxiety, but the fact that anxiety has increased so much recently does kind of suggest that there's something to do with the environment and the society that we're in now that's kind of making anxiety a lot worse. And I think maybe a lot of it is down to sort of information overload. And I think back to, when I was a child, say for example with the news, you might buy a newspaper, or you might, watch the news once a day. It would maybe be on at 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. But nowadays we've got 24-hour news channels. We've got news apps on our phone that are constantly delivering alerts. And there's been studies done into the news as well, that they use words like crisis, disaster, emergency sort of far more often now than they did years ago. So we're constantly receiving information that there's an emergency on, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Um, and I also think that, the pandemic had a huge part to play in it as well, because although that's kind of, lockdown's over now, we did go through such a massive change during the 2 years of lockdown. And, again, we were constantly kind of told that we needed to be cautious of catching COVID, and then it was suddenly over. But I think, it was very difficult for people to just switch that off and just get back on with their life afterwards. And that society changed a lot then as well. A lot of people started working from home when before they might have worked in the office. So, everything changed so dramatically, didn't it, in that
Mm.
time?
Absolutely. And we're also exposed to so many more visual concerns, aren't we now? And I'm sure we all remember the very horrific and distressing pictures of people being, so ill with their
Mm,
masks on, with their oxygen tanks there, and rows and rows and rows of people being so ill, and that feeling of being out of control and there was no cure. And if you just sort of go out and breathe, um,
yeah,
you could catch it. It was sort of like this hidden disease, sort of lurking, just sort of trying to catch you at any point. I remember myself personally going out to a supermarket and holding my breath because I was just so worried about, just getting it in the air, catching you as well. So absolutely, Anna, I totally agree with those explanations. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think as well, because it was a virus and because it was invisible, that made it more frightening, didn't it?
Yes.
Because, you can see if there's, a danger, but you couldn't see COVID, could you? So there was always like, is it here? Is it in this room? Is it in the supermarket? So yeah, yeah.
Yes, it did feel like a sort of like a something lurking, wasn't it? It was
Mm,
lurking to get you. And of course, that's going to activate our anxiety system, isn't it? Most certainly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
definitely. Yeah. And I think you're right about the words that people use. And I notice it myself in the media. They spend a lot of time speculating.
Mm,
So there was, I mean, it's awful to have all these wars around, but there's always a war. That if you go through history, there's always wars now. But again, we see more images, don't we? And then there's more kind of like, well, you know, it hasn't happened yet, but a lot of the media speculate about what might happen. So you sort of get this sort of fear response about, it hasn't happened yet, but it might happen tomorrow, or the war might get worse. So that's very much a what if thing, isn't it? That people with anxiety suffer from, is that kind of like, people speculate about the worst case scenario, but that's what you hear, isn't it? You hear the worst case, even if it hasn't happened, you hear about the worst case scenario. Is that your experience?
yeah, definitely all the time, so in regards to wars or, interest rates, what if interest rates go up and, people can't afford their mortgage payments. So there's always, a financial crisis, that could get worse, the climate change, and that could get worse. And then, recently the other day, I saw an article about bird flu and how bird flu could, get worse and cause another pandemic. And yeah, yeah. So constantly we're worried about something, aren't we? When we're being told that we should be worried about something all the time. And I think that's a major cause of anxiety.
Yes, and also the studies have proven, isn't it, that for some reason we're attracted to bad news. There's been examples where people have tried to put out good news newspapers, but they never seem to sell. So we're always told about the bad things that happen in the world, aren't we? But so many good things happen in the world, but they don't report on it. They report on all the bad things. So you're constantly fed this sort of like this picture, aren't you, of all these awful things happening in the world, which can be quite scary. Yeah.
I think so. And I think maybe that's like a kind of biological drive that we've got, because in an evolutionary sense, it makes sense for your brain to try and keep you safe. So it's
Mm,
only going to keep you safe if it's kind of looking for danger. So, looking for nice things isn't going to keep you safe. And your brain wants you to be safe all the time, doesn't it? So it's kind of not helpful, but your brain thinks it's being helpful,
mm.
maybe.
And that's a very good way of explaining it, isn't it, Anna? Is that
Mhm.
we have part of our brain which designs to keep us safe, and so it's looking out for danger. It's that survival
Mhm.
mechanism, isn't it? Isn't it? And that gets activated more and more. Um, the more
Yeah.
we think we're in danger as well. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely. So yeah.
okay. So, and when I do explain this to the clients that you see, and does that help them if you sort of have conversations about this?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, so usually what I do is, in the first couple of sessions, just get an idea of, their lifestyle and what it is that they're worried about. So, if people are kind of worried about things that are reported a lot on the news, then, that is something that I would sort of, go into with them or and some people I think with anxiety, they like to have something on in the background as a distraction, because I think that can help. But if that is the 24-hour news, then that's likely to make the anxiety worse. So, in those cases, I'd maybe suggest maybe putting some music on or, an uplifting podcast or an audio book or, something
Mm,
that's not going to constantly trigger the anxiety.
mm. Yes, yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, and you can get a little bit sort of obsessed with things, can't you? Sometimes you want to hear the next installment, and I've been in training courses where people have been checking their phone every time there's a break to see what else has happened in the news as well, so we sort of want this constant updates as well. Whereas if we've kind of got used to the habit of that, we're always checking our phones. And what you're saying is if you just try to use different techniques, then it sort of takes away that need to
Mhm.
constantly be looking or update for the latest update. It's like a more calm and more soothing kind of experience listening to music or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And if you think about it, that's only been an option fairly recently because years ago the news was on, maybe at 6 o'clock, maybe at 10 o'clock, and you might buy a newspaper, but obviously the newspaper was always a day behind on the news, wasn't it? So you couldn't get little 10, 15-minute updates all the time years ago. It just wasn't possible in the way
Mm.
that it is now.
Mm, mm. And they have people again talking about it as well, don't they?
Mm,
So not only would have the incident, you'd have some
mm,
commentary about it, so it becomes
mm,
elongated, whatever the issue is. There is
mm.
discussion about it and analysis and everything like that. So again, it keeps us interested, doesn't it? Because we want to hear more. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. Yeah. Okay. So so definitely media and actually having so much information overload is definitely some causes of anxiety. Are you aware of anything else that people might have? What else might cause them anxiety, Anna?
Um, I think it's often worth taking a look at, your diet and sort of what you're drinking. So, it's well known that caffeine can increase anxiety, for example. So, if someone's drinking a lot of coffee, which I know I'm guilty of, but if they get drinking a lot of coffee, and they're experiencing anxiety, it might be an idea to maybe cut back on that a little bit to see if that helps with the anxiety. And I think, obviously it's always a good idea to eat, a reasonably healthy diet, isn't it? And, have vegetables and things like that. So, if you are eating a lot of takeaways and things like that, again, it might be an idea to look at maybe having some more nutritious food just to see if that kind of helps you to feel a little bit calmer and less anxious.
Mm. Okay, so there's quite a lot of different areas you
Mm.
can look at when
Yeah.
somebody comes to see you and to sort of like really have that in. I think your point also is it's a very individual thing, isn't it? People, you try to get to know the person individually so you really understand what it is that they're looking for, what help they need. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because the factors that apply to one person won't to another. So, if you've got a mum with small children, their anxiety is probably going to look a lot different to, you know, say, a retired person who isn't working, and they're going to have different stresses. So yeah, it's about the stage of life the person's at, and their lifestyle, and stress factors, like finances, they can be a huge cause of anxiety, can't they, if they're a problem. So, money, um and family stresses and
Mm.
things like that. They can all play a role. So yeah, it's kind of getting an idea really of what's going on for a person, and then looking, at what the potential causes are.
I think something I find is a common theme is with people with anxiety is a sense of feeling out of control.
Mm.
Is sometimes they things that they can't control, like external events. So their children go out to school and they can't control what happens to them at school, so they might worry about things like that, or they try to put in things or be very very structured to try to keep as much control as possible. I don't know whether that's been your experience, Anna, as well, that people often with anxiety, it's that feeling out of control is often a common symptom that they have.
Yeah, I think it can be, and sometimes that can be, a challenge, especially if it leads to people sort of starting to avoid doing things, because I've seen quite often, if someone's struggling with a sense that they don't have control over something, then they, start to avoid it. So yeah, the example you gave of say a parent with children, um, they might feel uncomfortable about letting the children, go to, youth clubs or to parties or to socialize with friends because they can't control what's going to happen at those events. And yeah, so definitely, that feeling of being out of control can be a huge factor in anxiety.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, Anna, I think you've been very kindly prepared some strategies to help us to. I mean, this is no way going to replace somebody like your experience actually going to a counsellor with all your experience as well. But maybe for the listeners, there may be some strategies that you could perhaps tell us a little bit more about, which where people could perhaps learn how to manage their anxiety a little bit better themselves. Would that be possible, Anna?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So I've got sort of five things, as a little takeaway. So um the first one is really going off the back of the media, paying attention to what you're taking in. Um, so for some people, it might be really helpful to, turn off the notifications on their phone so their phone's not pinging as often. Um, and, maybe, try and cut down on the amount of time they're spending looking at the news, or even, social media, because again, I think sometimes social media can cause anxiety. Um, and the social media algorithms are very, very clever at kind of working out the stuff that we spend a lot of time looking at. And I think if you're kind of looking at things that uplift you, then that's really good. But sometimes if you see something shocking or horrific, you're kind of going to be drawn in to watch it. So for some people, their social media feed can be really anxiety provoking. So I think pay attention to that, and most social media, if you do get something that's that's not very nice, you can usually, there's like a thing where you can click show less or hide. So I recommend being free and easy with the unfollow button on social media if there's things coming up there that you don't want to see, or that aren't helping your mental health. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good tip. Yeah, and most people, everybody could do that, couldn't they?
Mm.
Everybody could actually just sort of like just think about that and think about their triggers and actually reduce them. Yeah, really good point. Thank you for that, Anna.
Yeah, yeah. Um, And then I think it's also good to have a few tips that you can use just to help yourself in the moment if you start to feel really anxious. And I always suggest sort of practicing these things, at times when you're not anxious, just so you're not trying to learn something new when you're in the middle of feeling really anxious. Um, there's lots of really good breathing techniques out there that you can use. But one that I like is called box breathing. And for that, what you do is you breathe in. It's good to maybe aim to breathe in for a count of 5, but if that's too difficult, you could breathe in maybe for a count of 3 instead. But you breathe in, count to 5, and then you pause and count to 5. Then you breathe out, count into 5, and you pause, and then you breathe in, and you just imagine that you basically, it's a box, so you're going in, hold, out, hold, and just go round like that. So yeah, 5 seconds is good to aim for, but if that's too hard, you can do it for less. The point is you're kind of paying attention to your breath, and you're also slowing your breathing down, because quite often when you're anxious, you tend to kind of breathe more shallowly and more rapidly, which can make it feel worse. So that's kind of helping to counteract that. If you don't like that technique, you can do a little search online, and there's lots and lots of different breathing techniques that can work. And I always say the right technique, the best technique, is the one that works for you, that you can do. So, try a few out until you find the right one. And I think another good tip is to learn some mindfulness. And a lot of people think that mindfulness is really difficult, or that you have to, I don't know, somehow become some sort of monk and meditate for 4 hours a day. But it's really not like that at all. Mindfulness can be really easy. And to me, it just means being present in the present moment, which is kind of the opposite of being anxious. Because when you're anxious, you're worrying about something that might happen or something that has happened. You're not here now. So mindfulness is just about bringing yourself back into the present. So that you can do that by becoming aware of your body. So one that I really like is the 3-3-3 technique. So with that, you just become aware of 3 things that you can see. So you just look around you, if you're in a room, it might be a wall, a chair, and a picture, anything. 3 things that you can touch. And that could even be just an awareness of the fabric that you're wearing, touching your skin. It could be being aware of the temperature of the air on your skin. Or it could be, if you've got a drink, the feeling of holding that warm mug of tea in your hand. And then 3 things that you can hear. And that's probably the most difficult one, because you might have to sort of tune in and really become aware of the different sounds. But in doing that, it kind of brings you into the present moment, into the here and now. So I think that can be a really good technique. And with mindfulness, I think the more you practice it, the easier it gets. So
And what I love about that technique, Anna, which sounds really, really good, is you can take that anywhere, can't you? And 333 is such an easy thing to remember. Most of us can remember that number 3 times. And wherever you are, you can do that, can't you? If you're on a train, on a bus, at home, waiting a doctor's surgery. So many places where you can just find those 3 things to do. So that sounds like a really good thing that people can, at work, who can do that, can't they? Yeah, really good.
definitely anywhere. And I always suggest as well, you kind of play around with it, because you might notice that there's one sense that kind of is more calming than another. So, if you find that the hearing one or the touch one is good for you, then you can just do that, but play with it and see what works for you and what helps you.
yes, again, it's back to sort of finding your own individual interpretation of what you're saying. And that's a really good thing that you're encouraging people just to sort of experiment and stay with it and find out what they notice as well. And I suppose, like you say, it depends on where you are. There might be places where smell, say in the garden, and the smell of flowers might be very, very prominent. So you can use that, couldn't you? You don't always have to stick to those things. You can actually add that, and that could be the dominant one, is what you're saying, and that
Mhm.
works just as well. Or at other times, like touching a warm cup of coffee might be the most intense sensation at that point, and then they can focus on that. So I love that. I love the kind of, encouraging people to find their own individual interpretation depending where they are and what they notice.
Yeah, definitely. And the smell one that you said, some people find it really good to have some essential oils or something, so you can get a tissue and pop some essential oils that you really like and then sort of smell them. And that can be really helpful. And smell and emotion are really strongly linked.
Mm.
So if there's a kind of smell that you remember as a child that's really comforting, that would be brilliant to use in this exercise. Like the smell of baking bread, most people love that, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I think, you can test that out beforehand, can't you? You
Hmm.
can go and, like you say, test these out when you're not anxious. So go and find a smell that you like, an essential oil, and test it. And then you can either put some on your hanky or have it with you as well. And then you can use that. And knowing it's there sometimes is a good thing as well, isn't it? Knowing that you've got that there, um, can give you some comfort. Okay. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I love that. So 333.
Yeah.
So that's great. So mindfulness, and I love that your simplicity of your explanation as well, Anna. Just to sort of
Hmm.
simply staying in the present moment, and not thinking you have to be like a monk who meditates for 2 hours a day. That's really good. It's something you can keep on working at. Just keep on being in the moment, and again, you can do that any time, anywhere as well. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Even, if you're just washing the dishes, you can notice the temperature of the hot water on your hands and, the texture of the plate in your hands and the feeling of the sponge in your hand. Yeah. So you can do it then. And literally anything that you're doing, you can do in a mindful way.
Mm, yes, yeah, and that's really good to do like with everyday activities, aren't we? Like you say, because
Mhm.
we're all so busy, aren't we, nowadays, that actually finding the time to do the mindfulness sometimes gets in the way. But if you do it when you're doing activities, you're practicing
Mhm.
mindfulness at the same time. That sounds like a really good way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't need to make time to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's great. So we've got breathing techniques, switching off devices, or doing that, and then we've got the mindfulness one. So yeah, they're really good. What other ones do you have for us, Anna?
So movement is a really good one. Um, and I think movement, again, whatever works for you. So for some people, movement might mean, going for a run or going to the gym. But you don't have to do that. You could just go for a walk outdoors, or you could do some easy yoga stretches in the house, or you could play tennis. So I think any movement that you enjoy, if you can do that, I think that can be a really good way of helping to reduce anxiety, especially if you can do it outdoors in nature. Um, that's not always easy in England with our climate. But if it's a nice day, or even if it's not a very nice day, and you can put a coat on and go outside, I think movement can be a really great way of boosting your mental health. Um, it's been shown that when you exercise, you release chemicals called endorphins, and they help you to feel better. They're like sort of your body's own natural painkillers. Um, so they can help you to feel better. They can boost your mood. Um, and yeah, movement's just so good for you. So I think movement,
Mm.
definitely.
And what I like about that idea, it's a very natural thing, isn't it, to do? And again, with our modern lifestyles, we spend a
Mhm.
lot of time in our heads, don't we? Or sitting down in front of computers as well. So whereas again, go back 50 years, we were walking more, cycling more, moving more, and now again our sedentary lifestyles has made us much more likely to move less. But I think our body rewards us when we move, doesn't it? Like you say, you get these natural endorphins. It's sort of like and it takes away again from the overthinking sometimes that happens in anxiety, doesn't it? You know, you're focusing on going somewhere or doing something, or you're focusing on your body again. So yeah, I really like that idea. And again, it's a very simple thing that almost everyone can do some kind of movement themselves, can't they? And again, I like the idea of ideally doing something you enjoy, because you're much
Mhm.
more likely to do it if you're going to enjoy it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Something that you enjoy and something that, fits your physical ability. Yeah. So, most people aren't going to be able to do half a marathon, and that's fine. Just do what you can do and do what makes you feel good.
Yes. And I think also now there's so much opportunities now with YouTube and the
Mhm.
internet as well and social media to find, if you can't go outside or if it's a really bad day, I totally agree with you. If you can go outside, that's much, much better. But you can also just follow somebody that you feel is a good professional online who's got, who's obviously got some credibility around them. So you can always do follow somebody doing some yoga or some dance movements or some tai chi online. If you can't get out or something like that, you can always do that in your own home, can't you? And that's just find out what you like rather than spending a lot of money going on different courses or classes. Find out what you like and what sort of movement you like. Just try it and see what you find.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think classes can be really good as well, just for a social aspect and a sense of community. So, I think for people if they feel maybe a little bit socially isolated, an exercise class can be really good.
Mm.
But again, you don't have to do that. You can do it at home as well.
Mm. Yeah. Or yeah, or like you say, try something you like and then
Mhm.
find an exercise class. Say you love Pilates, and
Mhm.
then if you really like that, then you can then find the class to go to as well, because you know what to expect and you know that you're hopefully going to enjoy it because you know the exercises already. So yeah, definitely. And that idea of sharing group experience, isn't it? When you go to a class, you're not on your own, and that can be quite pleasant as well. Just doing activities with other people. Yeah.
Yeah, being part of a community, isn't it? And having that kind of, social aspect to it. And I think that can be really good for a lot of people as well. So yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yes. So that's number four, movement. Okay, I've
yeah.
got that one. And what was the fifth one? I'm dying to know what the fifth one is, Anna.
So this is more of a don't do than a do. So number five is avoidance. Um, and when people get anxious quite often, and I know this is something that I'm really guilty of, um, they avoid doing the thing or thinking about the thing that makes them anxious, which, makes perfect sense logically, because if something makes you feel bad, why would you do it? Um, but number five is don't do that, because in the long run, the avoidance makes your anxiety worse. I think things become more and more difficult,
Mm,
and your triggers become greater. Um, so I always, when I'm working with clients, sort of work out, if I ask them, is there anything that you don't do because you're anxious? And then part of what I do as part of the work with them is to help them to start doing those things that they're not doing. And as they do that, their confidence grows. But I think you have to take it at a sort of steady pace, So if someone's, for example, feels really anxious about driving, I'm not going to say to them, okay, get in the car and drive down the motorway for
mm,
30 miles. It might start out with, get in the car and just drive to the bottom of your road, and then, build from there. Um, but yeah, definitely, try and overcome avoidance. And for some people, it can be brilliant to set themselves little challenges, so if there's
mm,
something that makes them feel a bit nervous, go and do it.
mm,
Um, yeah.
mm. And it's a really good point, isn't it? And you're so right about if you stop doing something, then you can lose your confidence, and then your world starts to shrink, because then you don't do that, then can't do that, then you can't do that. Whereas actually, I think what you're saying with your support,
Mhm.
you're encouraging people just to make those challenges, isn't it? Those small steps, those challenges, to sort of say, yes, you can do this, and sort of talk it through and how they're going to do it and everything like that. And of course, once they've done it, even though it can be quite anxiety provoking, again, the feel good factor of actually succeeding and doing something you've been avoiding for a very long time is an amazing feeling, isn't it? Again, the body rewards you for the dopamine feeling comes up, isn't it? And you get that, wow, I achieved that. So that's a really good thing to encourage people to do. I really get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well, you can use it as a kind of lesson in anxiety because when people are doing that, if they can kind of notice the anxiety and notice the uncomfortable physical sensations, but then also notice how it goes away again, then they start to build confidence in the fact that anxiety reaches a peak and then goes.
Mm.
And then it builds up their confidence for when they're in anxiety provoking situations in the future because they know I can endure that anxiety. It feels really unpleasant, but I can endure it. And then it goes away again afterwards. And when it goes away, I get to feel good about myself because I've faced that thing that was really bothering me.
Yes, and
Yeah.
it's sort of, rather than anxiety managing you, you're managing the anxiety. So the anxiety itself feels more manageable, because again, you feel more control over it, because you've faced it, like you say. And just knowing, like you say, about the anxiety, it'll reach a peak and it will go down again.
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing that as a fact is really, really important, because I suppose most people feel that anxiety is going to go up, it's going to go on forever, don't they? It's a common thought that people have. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Whereas what you're saying, as an expert in anxiety, is actually, it does actually go down eventually. And that's a really good thing, good thing for people to know.
Yeah, and I think when you're in the grip of it, it's really difficult to think about anything else, and it feels as if you are just that big anxious ball.
Mm.
Um, and it's impossible, I think, really to kind of logically think through it when it's at that peak. Um, but yeah, it reaches a peak and then it goes. But I think yeah, definitely if there is something you're avoiding, start facing it. But it's important not to try and do too much at once because you
Mm.
want to make it difficult enough so that you feel a little bit anxious, but you don't want to make it so difficult that you're like really panicking. So it's getting the right balance.
Yes, I'm sure working with somebody like yourself, Anna, that you can really help people with that. Because
Mm,
again, what I notice, sometimes people give themselves too much of a high expectation,
mm,
and then they fail, and then they feel really bad. Whereas I think what you're saying is, through conversation and discussion, you can help them to sort of set a realistic goal where their anxiety isn't too high, and get some sort of self-belief and achievement from that, and
mm.
that actually gives them the confidence to take the next step.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
just slowly push forward. And yeah, and also just recognizing as well that, on a bad day, you might be capable of pushing yourself less hard than on a good day. So you might have a day when your anxiety isn't very strong and you can do lots and lots of things. But then if you're going through a day when it's difficult, then you might struggle to do quite as much and that's okay as well. I think for me, I always stress the important thing is if you try and push through it and you try and face the things, then that's a win. Um, the win doesn't come when you can do that thing and not feel anxious at all. The win is that you felt that discomfort and you pushed through it anyway.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, I'm sure you're very good at encouraging people to just to understand that, and that
Mm,
the last little bit to push through.
Mm.
and to believe that you can do it and it will go down, isn't it? There's that final thing, taking that leap of faith, isn't it? And believing that you will be able to tolerate it. Yeah. So that's really, really good. And it sounds as
Yeah.
though again you can sort of suggest to people what to do and how to do it as well. And also encourage them, isn't it? Like you say,
Mhm.
rather than feeling, oh, I've had a bad day and I've failed and I haven't done anything. I think you're saying, well, actually, you've probably done a lot more than you think you have simply by doing X, Y, and Z. But again, clients tend to be a bit sort of harsh and self-critical on themselves and see all the failures, whereas I'm sure you're very good at actually pointing out the bits that they have done and what they have done well, and they have moved forward, and sometimes it's okay to have a bad day, and not do as well, and that's all part of the getting better process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and particularly with anxious people, I think they can be very harsh. I think anxiety and perfectionism tend to go hand in hand, and sometimes, with anxiety, it's kind of like I didn't do that perfectly, therefore I failed completely, and very much sort of all or nothing thinking. I
Yeah.
either got it all done or I did nothing, whereas yeah, I'd encourage to think more, actually I did quite well today. I got a lot done. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, so sort of high standards perfectionism. Yeah, um, I think definitely a trait I think people with anxiety have. Um, so yeah, just kind of just helping them to set their own realistic expectations, isn't it? And
Mm.
sometimes, I don't know if you feel this, but sometimes people are really kind to everybody else, but to themselves, they're the worst critic. They're the harshest critic. The judgments that they have, about themselves are, those sort of internal thoughts that people have sometimes, is another thing that I think people are with anxiety have. Yeah, that very harsh criticism.
Definitely. And I think, when you say that, I think that very much used to be me. I used to have a really harsh inner voice, and but I've kind of over the years really learned to kind of tone that down. And I remember I used to kind of think if I didn't have that inner critic, I would never get anything done, because, I would kind of think, well, it's stupid to kind of say well done if I haven't, achieved lots. But actually, the more compassionate I am with myself, actually, I think the happier I am, but the more I seem to actually be able to do. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, when you're in that very anxious state, your mind's not working very
Mm,
well, is it? It's kind of panicking, it's sort of very rigid sort of thinking. So you're much more
mm,
likely to, um, it's designed to do the fight or flight, run or fight, isn't it? It's a very
mm,
basic kind of reaction form. Whereas if you're in the compassionate kind of
mm.
mindset, it's much more calming and relaxing, and you can think things through, and your mind's clearer as well. So, yeah, that's a really good point you're making, Anna, about learning to be compassionate towards yourself is
Mm.
something I'm very fond of as well.
Yeah. One thing I like to do with that critical voice is to, give it a silly name and a silly voice and kind of imagine. I call mine Gertrude, and it's got a really silly voice, and it kind of looks like a green sort of goblin. And when it kind of starts, I'll kind of be like, okay, Gertrude, off you go. But the sillier I can make it, the better, because then I do kind of end up laughing a little bit, and that kind of breaks that tension as well, because
Very
it
good.
kind of becomes a bit funny. So
Yeah.
I think everyone should, maybe look at that and be a bit creative and make it the sillier you can make it, the better. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that inner Gertrude. I mean, that's so funny and they're really good. And you're right, it takes away some of the
Mm,
fear that inner voice has, the power that it has. It actually
mm,
makes it much more lighter and more humorous, so you don't take it quite so seriously. It's really good.
yeah.
And hopefully, no offense to any Gertrudes listening out there, it doesn't have to be a Gertrude to be
No.
any name that you choose. But it's I mean, I'm laughing. I can
Yeah.
imagine your own Gertrude now, and being all
Yeah.
green and a silly voice. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good technique. I love that. I think people can really, understand that and how that works, and play around with these ideas as well, isn't it? And actually have fun creating their own a name for their own inner critic, and a little character and a little voice as well. That's really good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sillier the better. So yeah, Gertrude, she looks very funny as well. So
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, that's really good. And I understand also you've done some work around some Socratic questioning, haven't you? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Anna, please?
Yeah, so Socratic questions are really they're named after the philosopher Socrates, who used to inquire, philosophically by asking, questions, encouraged to encourage people to kind of think through problems, and so Socratic questions are kind of similar to that. So um, I've got 5 Socratic questions that I think are really useful to help with anxiety. And if anyone sort of wants a written version of these, there's a version that you can download free. But I'll just go through them now. So the first one is there another way of looking at this? Um, so I think when you're in the midst of anxiety, sometimes you've got these unhelpful thinking styles. So you might be catastrophizing, so thinking of the worst case scenario. So just looking, is there another way of looking at this that can sometimes really help? Um, Sometimes I kind of suggest to people, if you kind of know someone who's really calm and collected, you can ask yourself, how would they see this problem? Um, and sometimes seeing it from a different perspective can help. Um, the second one is, what are the odds of this happening or being true? Um, because I think most of the time when we're anxious, we are worrying about an absolute worst case scenario, and the chances of that happening are quite low. I think there's few instances where we're worried about something that is likely to happen. Usually it's something that will probably never happen. And it can be good to recognize if that is one of the situations that you're in at the moment. Um, the third one is, what can I control? Because I mean, we said before, didn't we, about how anxiety often stems from feeling out of control. So sometimes it can be good to recognize what you can control, and if control what you kind of sensibly can. But if you can't control it, then you know let go. Um, so yeah, and you could, or another way of asking the question as well that can be helpful is, what can I do to improve this situation? Um, which kind of reframes it slightly, because you're not thinking about controlling the situation, you're thinking about improving the situation. So that can help. The next one is, am I safe right now? Um, and this is another question where the vast majority of the time, the answer will be yes. There's few instances where you will be in danger in the present moment. So sometimes recognizing that right now you're safe. You might be worrying about something that happens in the future, but here in this present moment, you are safe. And the final question, what's one small step that I can take right now to feel better? Um, and the answer to that will be different for everyone in different situations, but it could be, I could go for a little walk. It could be, I'll get my clothes ready for tomorrow so that when I get up in the morning, I haven't got as much stress of getting everything ready, because everything will be ready for me. It could be, I'll phone a friend that I can trust and have a chat with them. But yeah, just to identify one small thing that you can do right now that will help you to feel better.
And they sound marvelous questions. And again, it's something that people can apply to lots of different situations when they're anxious, or lots of different situations, because they can just write down the answer to that. And you're
Mm,
so right, like you said, the Socratic thing is you're trying to get you to provide the answer. It's a very
mhm.
empowering and very sort of getting you to think of your own ideas on how to actually deal with those situations. So I love that, Anna. That's really good. And I think you've done a download that people can download. Um,
Yeah.
is that right? Just tell us how people could download that then, Anna.
Um, so if you go to my website, which is annapluck.com, and then if you navigate to the tab for free resources, there's an option to download it on there. And I'll also give you the link that you could put in the podcast information as well.
That'll be fantastic, Anna. So much for that. So there'll be those details of yours, your website, and the link there in the show notes so that people
Yeah.
can actually download that from that. Because I think also something, just to add what you said, there's something quite nice about having a sheet with the
Mhm.
questions on, and then you can answer the questions, can't you? Writing that down and really getting your brain to engage in finding the solutions. That's the power, isn't it, of that technique. It sounds so simple when you explain it, but actually it's a really really powerful thing that people can again take around with them and use as a resource in many different situations, and will really get the benefit from that. So I love that as a
Yeah.
strategy to as your final strategy. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So strongly
Yeah.
encourage people to download that and to use that. And I suppose by giving your website, if anybody wants to see you as a specialist in anxiety, they'd be able to contact you via your website.
Yeah, definitely. So I work in Chester and Birkenhead on the Wirral, and also online. So yeah, people can book an appointment to see me then, or if they want to, they can just book a free 20-minute sort of phone chat really to find out a little bit more as well.
Okay, so that's really good. You provide a free consultation as well. But if
Mhm.
people don't mind remote, and one of the small things I think that's come out of the pandemic we were talking about earlier is that people are much more open to having remote sessions. So if people really like what you're saying, anybody in this country or above
Mhm.
could actually access you but remotely and work with you. So that's really powerful, isn't it? And that's a great opportunity for people to. Sometimes people don't know what they want, do they? They want help, but they're not quite sure where to go or to get help. But you being a specialist in anxiety, people will be able to come to you because they understand you've got that real specific knowledge about how to help people.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's so good that we can work on Zoom now because before the pandemic, I don't think anyone really would have seriously considered having counselling online, but because we had to do it in COVID, I think yeah, people see the benefit of it, and it can be really good. You can have therapy in your lunch break from work if you can get somewhere private in work. There's no reason why you couldn't just have therapy in your lunch hour, so
Very
yeah.
much so. Or again, people working from home,
Mhm,
it's sometimes quite easy to just take the hour off if they've
mhm.
got flexible working practices, and to have that resource there. So yeah, lots of opportunities there. Okay, Anna. So,
Yeah.
and I know you've just shared a couple of, a few strategies. You've got loads more. We're just like some small, simple things that people can do to help themselves. But you've got far more resources as well that you can share with people if they start working with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's sometimes a bit of trial and error and a bit of experimentation to find out, what works for you. So, um, you can try different techniques and then if they don't work, there's always other techniques that you can
Mm.
use. But I think sometimes the mistake that people make is, say they've heard that yoga is really good if you've got anxiety. Um, But then if you hate yoga and you just don't get on with it, then, trying to do a yoga video every day it's going to frustrate you and probably make your anxiety worse. So you need to try something else. And yoga can be really good for anxiety, but it's not good for everyone. So it's finding what works for you.
Absolutely. And I've heard people go to therapy, and the therapist has said to them, we'll just go for a walk. Now, number one, I
Mm,
don't think a therapist would ever just say, just go for a walk,
mm,
because it's not, it's a lot more complicated than that.
yeah.
But I think if people understand the rationale behind going for a
Mm,
walk, how it helps you, the scientific benefits of going for a walk as well, and actually the range of opportunities. It's not all about just going for a walk. It's finding about, like you say, movement is a really good way of helping you, and what's the correct movement. It makes the conversation much more deeper and much more individual for that person to find, like you say, that the thing that suits them. It's too simplistic to say just go for a walk. Sometimes it takes a lot more kind of thought and trial and error, as you say, to find the things that really work for that
mm.
person as an individual.
Yeah, I think if someone tells you just go for a walk, that kind of almost feels a bit like a punishment, doesn't it? It feels like you're being punished out. Like if we make you suffer, then your anxiety will go away. But yeah, it's got to be something, yeah, something that you've got to choose to do it, haven't you? So yeah, as you say, it's about having a conversation and explaining, the benefits and why something might help, and then the person can choose then what they feel they want to do, and then it's not a punishment, is it? It's a personal choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, lovely. Well, Anna, thank you so much for all your wise information you've given us, all those sort of top tips and techniques. I think they've been really brilliant, because the way you've explained them is very clear and very simple, but they're also really effective and very, very powerful as well. So I'm hope that the listeners will find a lot of, interest in what you've got to say, and like you say, they can follow it up further by downloading the Socratic sheet, but also if they want to see a therapist, to get in touch with you directly via your website.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Anna, for being a guest on the show today, and thank you everybody for listening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.